It's never fun to lose. I thought we got a pretty good look out of it. But again, I think, we shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. The 17 turnovers got us there. So, yeah, we shouldn't have even been there. But I thought, Kelsey got a look at it. It's unfortunate, but, yeah, on to the next.
Stephanie White, I've had it up to here with you. I've had it up to here. I know you are going to take zero accountability as...
Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed one of the most infuriating displays of coaching and competence in recent WNBA history, and honestly, I'm done pretending that Stephanie White isn't a huge problem for this Indiana Fever squad. Last night's 81-80 loss to the Dallas Wings wasn't simply a heartbreaking defeat. It was a masterclass in how poor coaching decisions can derail a talented roster, squandering opportunities that should never be allowed to slip away.
Held down 14 points to a team that had 8 wins on the goddamn season. Stop.
While everyone is quick to blame the referees for this disaster, and trust me, the officiating was downright garbage, the real culprit was sitting right there on the sideline in a Fever uniform, refusing to take any accountability for the systematic failures that cost Indiana a winnable game against one of the league's worst teams.
That's on the coach. Look, if you want to continue to defend this coach, go right ahead. My defense of hers, nah. I was thinking earlier today, what would it take for Stephanie White to get me on her side? She'd have to win.
Smash that like button and drop Fire White in the comments, because what I'm about to break down will leave you questioning how this woman still has a job coaching professional basketball. Let's start with the most glaring issue that almost nobody dares to address: Stephanie White's complete inability to prepare her team for critical stretches of a game. The Fever surrendered a 21-3 run to Dallas in the third quarter at home, no less against a team that entered the night with a miserable 8-24 record. Just think about that for a second. You're playing in front of your own fans facing one of the league's worst squads, and you cough up a 21-3 run that all but seals the outcome before the fourth quarter even begins.
Watch one of the biggest puke fest I've ever seen in my entire life. You know what should never happen? A 21-3 run at home by the opposing team on you, when the opposing team is the Dallas Wings and they're not any good. I mean, seriously, what just happened during this game? Once again, the Indiana Fever come out into a third quarter and they got embarrassed.
That's not players making mistakes. That's not bad luck. That's coaching malpractice of the highest order. When your team comes out of halftime looking completely unprepared and then gets absolutely dismantled for an entire quarter, that responsibility falls squarely on the head coach, the one who's supposed to have them ready to compete. The most infuriating part: how predictable this disaster has become under Stephanie White's so-called leadership. This isn't the first time the Fever have come out flat in critical moments. It's not even the second. No, this has become their signature move under her guidance. Game after game, you can count on Indiana to have at least one quarter where they look lost, disorganized, and outmatched by teams they should be dominating with ease.
Have a coach that allows the Dallas Wings to go on a 19-0 run without making any adjustments, without calling a timeout. Dallas Wings 19-0 run. When we have all of these factors working against us, it's going to be very hard to win game.
Last night, it was the third quarter against Dallas, but we've seen this movie before. Chicago, Atlanta, you name it. Every team that should be begging for mercy against a roster with this much talent ends up looking like a contender because Indiana falls apart. When the same problems keep happening over and over again, you can't keep blaming the players. At some point, you have to look at the coaching staff that's failing to put them in position to succeed. And here's what makes it even more maddening: Stephanie White's post-game press conference. Instead of taking ownership of the collapse, she blamed everything and everyone except herself. She talked about turnovers. She complained about officiating. She mentioned the injuries at point guard. Excuse after excuse, hoping something would stick. But you know what we didn't hear? Not a single moment of accountability. Not one admission that maybe, just maybe, her coaching decisions contributed to this disaster. When a reporter asked her what went wrong during that devastating third quarter run, White immediately shifted the blame to defensive attention to detail and players making uncharacteristic mistakes, completely deflecting from her own responsibility to have this team prepared. organized, and ready to compete.
If Stephanie White takes any accountability for how this game played out, and we know she probably won't.
Just had a lead in the middle of the third quarter, and then that big Dallas run was the difference. What did you see go sideways in that stretch?
Well, I didn't think our attention to detail on defense was very good. They got loose for some easy ones. We started fouling, getting to the free throw line, and turning the ball over. I mean, there were moments where, there's no transition defense for turnovers for scores. And, we had multiple in a row. I mean, 27 points off of turnovers. And, I felt like our group did some uncharacteristic things with the ball in our hands, and it led to easy buckets.
The excuses are becoming more insulting than the actual coaching performance, because at least bad coaching can be corrected with better preparation and smarter adjustments. But when a coach flat out refuses to acknowledge their mistakes and keeps making the same errors week after week, that's when you know the problem runs deeper. That's no longer about X's and O's. That's a fundamental leadership failure.
Any of this your fault, Stephanie White? Is any of this your fault, or are you about to sit here and pass the buck to each player individually to make it seem like you have no part in this?
Stephanie White keeps talking about players doing uncharacteristic things, but let's be real, there's nothing uncharacteristic about this. These are the exact same problems we've seen all season long. Aliyah Boston still struggles to establish position in the post. Kelsey Mitchell still over dribbles and locks into tunnel vision. Natasha Howard still insists on bringing the ball up the court like she's a point guard. None of this is new. These aren't random mistakes, they're coaching failures that have been ignored for months.
Quarters and halves where we come out not ready to play. We come out making no adjustments. We come out slow, lethargic. The Dallas Wings went on a 19-0 run, and we're sitting there. Wait, did we call a timeout? Was there a timeout called during this 12-0 run? No, there wasn't. Oh, okay. Just making sure. 12-0 run turned into a 19-0 run, turned into a 21-3 run.
The timeout management in the final seconds was the perfect snapshot of everything wrong with Stephanie White's game management and decision-making. With the Fever down by 1 and a chance to win, White inexplicably waited until there were just 1.7 seconds left before calling timeout, basically erasing any chance of running a real play or getting a quality shot. Any competent coach calls that timeout with at least 3-4 seconds remaining, giving their team multiple options and an actual opportunity to execute. Instead, she waited until the absolute last moment, leaving Kelsey Mitchell with nothing but a desperation heave that had zero chance of going in. That's not bad luck. That's not the refs. That's straight up poor coaching, and it directly cost Indiana a winnable game. And let's be clear, the timeout disaster was just the cherry on top of a coaching performance already plagued by awful rotations, questionable substitutions, and a complete refusal to make adjustments once Dallas started seizing control.
Bibby, 11 points in 12 minutes, and you can bet your ass she got hot, and Stephanie White took her out. I mean, like clockwork.
You coaching them to lose to sorry teams, bruh. Y'all ain't going to no playoffs with your mentality, bruh, because you think your way is the best way, bruh. Look, like I said, you're throwing the games, and the organization, they in on it too. You hear me? We already know that y'all can't even win without CC like that, to be honest, because if y'all could, y'all would have been winning.
Chloe Bai came off the bench and immediately drilled 3 3-pointers in the first half, bringing exactly the kind of spark and shooting the Fever needed to pull away from a struggling Wings team. So how did Stephanie White reward that performance? By barely playing her in the second half, essentially yanking her out of the rotation at the very moment Indiana needed scoring the most. It's the kind of rotation management that makes you wonder if the coach is even watching the same game as everyone else in the arena. And the defensive schemes? Just as baffling. Stephanie White, who her supporters claim is some kind of defensive guru, stood there as her team got absolutely torched by players who should never be scoring this easily against a competent system. Case in point, Lee Ueru, a backup center who rarely sees meaningful minutes for Dallas, came in and flat-out dominated Aliyah Boston in the paint, making her look like she was up against high school competition.
Aliyah Boston, 14 points, 5 boards. She got dominated by Lee from 3. Leah Ueru dominated AB. Leah Ueru dropped 20 points on AB's head top.
Didn't you say you were turning Aliyah Boston into the Joker and being this hub, playing at the top of the key, being a hub and a decision maker? Why wasn't she hubbing her ass around and making plays and dominating the backup big Lee Ureru who tore her?
When your so-called defensive anchor is getting worked over by a bench player from one of the league's worst teams, that's not just bad luck, that's a coaching problem demanding immediate adjustments. Instead, White stood by and watched, as if things would somehow fix themselves, making no meaningful changes at all. And then came the most telling moment of the entire post-game press conference, when Stephanie White was directly asked about taking accountability for the team's struggles.
Grabbed all this, but the turnovers, only 15 assists. What kind of led to the disorganization that you saw on the offensive end tonight?
Well, all of our point guards are injured. I think that's the first thing. And again, it's one of those things. Dallas turned up the pressure. I mean, defensively, they made it a little bit more difficult for us to bring down the ball and initiate offense, and became a little bit more disruptive. And we're working Odyssey into what we do, but still, it's tough because point guards are the ones who get you organized. And there were times where we weren't organized. There were times where
She couldn't even acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, her coaching had something to do with the team's poor performance. Instead, she chose to blame circumstances and opponents for problems that clearly stem from preparation and game management. When your team coughs up 27 points off turnovers, and your response is, Dallas made things difficult, you're basically admitting you had no plan for dealing with pressure and no ability to make the adjustments necessary to stop the bleeding. Oh, but wait, it gets better. White had the audacity to claim her players were doing uncharacteristic things, as if we haven't been watching this same garbage all season. Uncharacteristic? Lady, are you even watching the same games as the rest of us? Aliyah Boston has been floating at the top of the key all year instead of establishing post position like a true center. Kelsey Mitchell has been over-dribbling since day one, treating the basketball like it's glued to her hands. Natasha Howard has been trying to run point guard duties all season, looking lost every time she touches the ball outside the paint. These aren't uncharacteristic behaviors, they're systemic coaching failures that have been ignored for months while White pretends everything is fine. This pattern of excuse-making and deflection has become the defining trait of Stephanie White's tenure. Every loss comes with a new excuse. Injuries, officiating, players not executing, always someone else to blame. But here's a revolutionary concept for Coach White. Good coaches find ways to win despite those challenges. They make adjustments. They take responsibility. They own it when their decisions fail. White does none of that. Instead, she passes the buck, hoping talent alone will bail her out of situations that better coaching could have prevented in the first place. The nerve of this woman to sit in that press conference and act like she's a victim of circumstance is mind-blowing. You want to talk about uncharacteristic? How about a professional basketball coach who refuses to acknowledge her own mistakes? How about a supposed defensive guru whose team just surrendered 81 points to a Dallas squad that usually struggles to score on middle school defenses? How about someone who's paid to make strategic decisions, but consistently makes choices that hurt her team's chances of winning? That's what's truly uncharacteristic for someone who's supposed to be coaching at the highest level of women's basketball. And the offensive execution in crunch time. It perfectly illustrated White's inability to design plays that maximize her roster's strengths. With the game on the line, needing a basket to tie or win, the Fever ran nothing that even resembled an organized set. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell dribbled sideways for several seconds before hoisting a contested three that never had a realistic chance. That's not players failing to execute, that's a coaching staff that failed to prepare for end-of-game situations. White left her stars stranded, expecting them to figure it out on the fly. But sure, let's blame the players for not being telepathic enough to read White's mind about what play she wanted. Maybe, if she actually drew up something coherent, instead of relying on Mitchell to conjure a miracle, the outcome might have been different. The fact that Indiana's best offensive strategy in crunch time was basically give it to Kelsey and pray tells you everything you need to know about this coaching staff's preparation and decision-making. This is professional basketball, not a pickup game at the local YMCA. Yet Stephanie White's end-of-game management would